Okay, we are live. Okay, everyone. Welcome. Parsha, my live class, Parsha Bechukosei. Anybody that wants to sponsor this class, you are welcome to sponsor it. We don't have a sponsor yet. Post class, that'd be nice. Any birthday, yard site, any other special occasion. L'chaim. This week is a very special week because we have Parshas Chazak. We're finishing the third book of the Torah. We're concluding the book, Sefer Vayikra, and we get to learn Parshas Bechukosei. Now, many years, Bahar Bechukosei go together, so not necessarily does the parsha get enough attention. This year, it's two separate parshios. In Israel, it's the next parsha, it's already Bamidbar. But for us, it's Bechukosei, and we get to learn this parsha. And Bechukosei is a very powerful parsha. It's the reward, telling us all what's going to be when Moshiach comes, the awesome blessings. Then it has some intense stuff, talking about all the stuff that happened already in the exile that are very severe. It's called the Teichacha, the rebuke. It's pretty horrific. It's good to know that we're kind of past it. And we survived and we're intact. Like the Pasuk says, God says, we're going to remain intact. So one of the verses mentioned in the beginning of the parsha, here it is, talking about all the blessings that are going to happen. So this is the last word in the blessings. After this starts the opposite of the blessings, which we know, according to the mystical idea, is that that's also blessings, but those are hidden blessings, disguised blessings. But these are the revealed blessings. And as Mefarshim say, that most of these blessings are referring to the time when we achieve ultimate status in this world. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there will be peace in the land. Hashem says, "I will change the nature of the animals. They won't be predatory anymore. They won't be harmful anymore," and so on and so forth. Well, the last words over here, it says, "Ve'ejboy Hashem." This is in Pasuk Perek Chavav, chapter 26, and this is in Leviticus, chapter 26, of verse 13. It says, "Ve'ejboy," and I will break moitos. Again, this verse can be read as a reference to what happened already or what is going to happen. Because the pasuk says, let me read the whole verse. The verse says, "I am God your God that took you out of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am God your God that took you out of Egypt. She'esi eschem eretz Mitzrayim. Miyois lahem avodim, from to be to them slaves. Ve'ejboy, and I broke moitos ulchem, the staff of your yoke." Like a yoke has a staff, a stick to it, a bar, which is on a yoke of a neck of a slave or of an ox or something. So that's referring to the yoke of exile. God says, "I have broken it, and I led you out of Egypt." That's if we read the pasuk, the verse referring to the past. We can also read that these last words of the pasuk is referring to the future. Ve'eshbar, I will break, referring to Hashem says, "I will break all yokes, all servitude, all subjugation." And we have, whether it's subjugation to some external force. Sadly, today, most of our exiles are not to external forces, but internal forces. Sometimes we can be enslaved to dark elements within ourselves, and which we can't get out of. And the idea is Hashem says, "I will break it finally. You'll be a free human being to live a godly life." And then what is the last words? "I will lead you in an upright posture." So the sages say about this that this is actually telling us about the enormous height that people will reach in the future. We will become much, much, much taller. It's a passage in the Talmud. The Talmud is in two places: Tractate Sanhedrin and Tractate Baba Basra. Tractate Sanhedrin, I think it's on page Kuf, Daf Kuf, which means page 100. And in Tractate Baba Basra, the one I will be reading from, it's on page 75, Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. So the Gemara brings over here, I will lead you in an upright posture. Rabbi Meir says, Mosayim Amma. What's going to be the height? God says, I will lead you up to a height. You will be 200 cubits tall. Where does he derive it? The height of the human being of the future will be 200 cubits tall. Let's assume that a cubit is around 18 inches. So 200 cubits, which means a foot and a half, is about 300 feet. We'll make LeBron James and all these guys look like little midgets. That's going to be the height of the future. Why? Because Adam, the first human being, he was 100 cubits tall after the sin. Initially, it says his height would reach the sun, the enormous tall. Then God shrunk him, but even after he was shrunken, he was still 100 cubits tall. 300. He was a giant. So when it says, "I will lead you," kaimemios. Now here's the thing. Kaimemios means like up and tall in your full height. The full height of who? So if we're thinking about the full height of someone, so we're not talking about the normal height of today. We're talking about the original height of man. And the original human height was 100 cubits. But as the Mefarshim say, since it says kaimemius, which is either because there's two mems, that's how the Rashbam learns, one of the commentators on the Gemara. The Rashbam learns, since there is two mems in the word, kaim means height. Kaimemi is as if it would say two times kaim, which means height. So it's not Adam, the height of Adam, it's double Adam, double Adam Arishon. So Adam Arishon is 100 cubits, we will be 200 cubits tall. Or the Marsha learns, one of the other commentators, that it's because it uses in the plural. Kaimemi yois. If it would be singular, it would be kaimemis. Kaimemi yois with an extra vav. Kaimemi yos, the extra vav. Vav makes it into plural. So I will lead you into heights, plural heights. So from the plural heights, we learn plural, and we don't know how many, it's at least two. So it's two heights of Adam. So the future structure of the height of the human being will be 200 cubits. And the Gemara says, Kishtei kaimai shel Adam Arishon, like twice the height of Adam Arishon, the first human being. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that's one opinion. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Meya Amma. No, only 100 cubits tall. Rabbi Meir says 200 cubits. Rabbi Yehuda reduces it to half that. 100 cubits, meaning equal to the height of Adam. But Rabbi Yehuda says, how do you know that? Keneged heichal uksalav, corresponding to the height of the temple. Heichal is the temple. The second temple, and the second temple was 100 cubits tall from the outside. The inside room was less than that, only 40 cubits tall. But from the outside, standing outside of the temple and looking up to the roof of the sanctuary in the temple, in the second temple, first temple was shorter, but I think only 70 cubits tall. Second temple was 100 cubits tall. And the third temple, in Yecheskel, in Ezekiel, it doesn't say. So we assume that all those things that it doesn't say by the third temple, any explicit differentiation than the second temple, then we assume that those elements are going to be equal to the second temple. That's what Maimonides says. Maimonides says that there are definitely many changes in the third temple, which are going to be unique to the third temple. There were not. But those are the things that are explicitly stated in Ezekiel, in Yecheskel, when it describes the shape and the form of the third Beis HaMikdash. But those areas where it doesn't, Maimonides says the second temple and the third temple then are equal. So in that sense, the height, even though he doesn't say it explicitly regarding the height, but that's what we can derive from. So says the Rebbe. We can derive that the third temple will be 100 cubits tall as well. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The height of the human being in the future will be 100 cubits, like the height of the temple. Shenema, now that's it creates a problem. What's the problem? How will the human being go into the temple if he's just as tall as the temple? That's a good question. I didn't think of it till I'm giving the class right now. But we're gonna have to deal with that. Shenema, we're not gonna deal with that now. Maybe another week because I don't have the answer. Now let's step back a minute. So we have over here an argument, especially according to Rameir. According to Rameir, the human height is gonna be 200 feet tall, and he's got a temple that's only 100, not 200 feet, 200 cubits. Please don't let this question bother you, because I want you to listen to the rest of the class and not be thinking about this. Okay, so just erase this question from your head, and let's just focus back. So there's an argument to learn in the Talmud if a human height is going to be 200 cubits tall, twice the height of Adam Arishon, or 100 cubits. Now, I want to stop a minute here. Does this mean that suddenly the shofar will blow, Moshiach is here, and we will all shoot up? So what are we going to do with our pants? Like, what's going to happen? It's going to really be weird. So the pashtus, on the simple, we're talking about the people that are going to be born or created after the resurrection. We're talking about, this is the post-resurrection. This is the future. Not when Moshiach comes. This is at the time of the resurrection. And God is going to recreate the human being. And as the Maharsha says, a very interesting thing. The Maharsha says, Rebbe Meir, where does Rebbe Meir know that the height, that we're going to be 200 cubits tall? Where does he know? Because the verse says, I will lead you kaimemius, which means double height. See, it means it says it in the plural, it means double height. Yeah, but how do you know? Maybe double height of what we are today. What are we today? From people, some people shorter, 5 feet tall, 6, some people almost 7 feet tall, so double that. So the tall people will be 14 feet tall, and shorter ones will be, 10 feet tall. Where do you take 100 cubits, which is 100, which would be 100 cubits would be 150 feet tall, or 300 feet tall? Where do we get that? So we're saying it's twice the height of Adam. The pasuk doesn't mention Adam over here. Where do we have Adam mentioned? It doesn't mention anywhere in the pasuk. So the Maharsha says that we don't need a verse for. That we know that we're going to be at least as tall as Adam. Why? Because we know when God created the world, He created it in a pretty perfect state. But as perfect as the world was when God created it, it will not have reached the perfection like it's going to be when the world is going to be perfect after we're done fixing it. After the long, difficult, and laborious, painful work of mankind to elevate the world, which involved sin and fall and all that, but all that is part of a journey. And when we're going to reach the ultimate world, which is going to be post-resurrection, it cannot be, and since God is going to be recreated, so we're not dealing with a miracle of us growing into that height. We're talking about God recreating the human being. That world is not going to be any less than the perfection of this world. And since in this world, Adam was 100 feet, so that's for sure going to be, 100 cubits, for sure it's going to be 100 cubits. The only question I have on that, which we can ask immediately, is that the 100 feet was not Adam when he was in his glory. That was Adam after post-glory, after Hashem shrunk him. Before that, he was even way taller. If we're going to say the world is going to go back to its ultimate perfection, then it should go back to the state of Adam before the sin. That's a question that I put out to everybody over here. You can research and give me the answer. I don't have the answer to that. So we have already two problems. Two questions for homework today. One of them is, how are we going to go into the temple if the temple is only going to be 100 cubits tall? And the second question is, why, if we're saying that we're going to be at least as perfect as we were at the onset of creation, then we should be as tall as we were before the sin? But the Maharsha doesn't address that, and he just says, if the perfect human was 100 cubits, then we're going to be at least that. Now, but then the verse says, use double, twice height. So from there we know it's not going to be one time the height of Adam, it's going to be twice the height of Adam. That's again according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says that the height of the human being is going to be 100 cubits. Now I'm going to stop right over here and say, obviously we understand that the physical height is a reflection of spiritual stature. The main idea over here is the spiritual stature. But the physical body is just facilitating the quality of the soul, the energy of the soul. A bigger body is standing for a greater soul capacity. Doesn't mean today that necessarily big people with big bodies have greater soul quality and more powerful souls than short people or people that are petite and small. Not necessary. Obviously, the spirituality is not measured by that. That's within the general realm of human height today. But when we're speaking, when Moshiach will come, we will suddenly become immeasurably taller. We can understand that the necessity for that is because a greater light, a greater vessel, a greater container. So the quality that we're going to reach then, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is 100. According to Rabbi Meir, it's 200 cubits. Now we're going to see soon that everything is going to be flipped over. And the time we're going to get to the end of the class, we're going to realize it's not so simple. Because according to the way we're understanding it right now, Rabbi Meir's opinion is superior to Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Meir is giving the human being 200 cubits of height, which we, again, not only physically tall, but spiritually as well. And Rabbi Yehuda is only giving the human being equal height to Adam, which is only 100 cubits, which would mean that Rabbi Yehuda's level of understanding of the attainment of the human level, the level of humanity in the days of in post-Moshiach days, is only half of what Rabbi Meir. We're soon going to see it's not so simple. We're going to see that it's quite possible Rabbi Yehuda is way, 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 way deeper in what he is saying than Rabbi Meir. But we're going to get to that. Let's first see what we learn over here. Again, we have an argument over here, 200 cubits or 100 cubits. Where does Rabbi Yehuda say? How does he know that? He says corresponding to the height of the temple. Okay. Now, why in the world are you comparing the human being to the height of the temple? Where do we get that from? It's a verse in Psalms, in Tehillim. Shanema, in Tehillim it says, this is in verse Psalm 144, Kapitel Kuf Mem Dalet, verse number 12. It says, Asher Banenu Kinetiyim Megudalim Benureim. Our sons are like young trees, young saplings, Megudalim, that are nurtured from their youth, referring to the future of what the children are going to be like. Our children are going to be, by that time, I guess we're going to be over the crisis with the baby formula, right? So we're going to have, there's not going to be problems. There's going to be, all the young are going to be nurtured without a problem. And they're going to be migudalim, binureim, they're going to be full height, growing from their youth. And then it says, binoiseinu, our daughters, that's referring to the boys. Binoiseinu, our daughters, kizaviyos, like the cornerstones, mechutavos, crafted tavnas heichal, in the form of the heichal, of the temple. So it's referring to our children, particularly the girls, that they are going to be crafted in the form of the temple. So here Rabbi Yehuda says, if it compares the girls to the temple, the children, and again, the girls to the temple, means that just like the temple, the height is 100 cubits, so too, this is also going to be 100 cubits. That's how Rabbi Yehuda knows that that's going to be the height. Okay. That's the argument in the Talmud again, and as I mentioned to you, this passage of the Gemara is to be found in two places, in Masechtas Baba Basra and also in Masechtas Sanhedrin. So let me share with you first a cool, very, very just, amusing insight from Rameya Yechiel of Ostrovsk. He was a great genius living in Poland before the war, the Ostrovsk Rebbe. And he has like these very, very, very genius calculations always. And it's what we call real Polish Torah. It's the type of Torah that I usually don't share with you. It's usually taking different midrashic elements and finding like things that don't make any sense, and then coming up with a brilliant type of mathematical calculation, pulling from like 50 different places that we would think are unrelated. And then the time you're done with it, your head is spinning. And he was able to take like the most, in other words, we're able to take these most random statements that seem not to have anything to do with the other, and then show how they're all connected, and why when you add A plus B plus C plus D, all these together, and then you'll arrive at this stunning, it's literally fun learning it. It's so entertaining because it's so far-fetched, but yet he brings it together in such a phenomenal way. So he has like hundreds of pieces like this. Here on this, he gives, thank God this is a very short calculation. It's not too much. It's just four or five steps. On this idea that the human height is going to be, at least according to Remeir, 200 cubits. He says, what's the significance of that? Why? So he brings first, there's a question that's asked. We discussed it in the past as well. By the resurrection, all souls are coming down. The question that we've dealt with is that since there are incarnations, many incarnations, to one soul, so which body is going to get up? Is to be a resurrection. How can our answer that we gave, and this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's take on this, we discussed it, that all bodies belonging to one soul are all going to be resurrected from the same soul. How that's possible is not the discussion for tonight. That's the question we've dealt with. He's like delving on the same kind of a question. He's basically saying, since there's only 600,000 Jewish souls, that's the amount of root souls, it says, that went out of Egypt, and that's the sum total of Jewish souls. If that's the case, it would seem like there's only 600,000 souls, so that would mean that every generation is really just a replay of those same souls. The generations are just the same souls coming again and again and again. So now it's not a problem, because you can have these souls coming down again and again and again and again for many experiences down here in this world. The problem is by the resurrection, all the bodies are going to get up. Same kind of question. But there's going to be so many bodies for the same 600,000 souls. So what's going to be? How are all these bodies going to be enlivened by the same 600,000 souls? That's his question, same idea that we were talking about. So he gives a very cool answer. And based on what we're saying over here, as we're going to see, starts off with the idea that the sages tell us that the world, the duration of time that God set for the creation is 6 days. Just like there's 6 days that God created the world in 6 literal days. So the world is, by God, 1,000 years is a day. It's a verse in Tehillim. I'm sorry. Like to you, Hashem, 1,000 years is like 1 day. Okay. So Sunday for Hashem is 1,000 years. Monday is another 1,000 years. And based on that, Chazal say Shis Alfi Shnin Heva Alma. The world is here for 6,000 years. And then comes the Shabbos, and whatever is going to happen afterwards, the worlds are going to be elevated into a different kind of an existence. But now we're 5,782. So we're creeping up towards the end of 6,000. We're less than 220 away. And this includes Messianic time. So, okay, so now we have 6,000 year chunk. Now, how many generations are there during the 6,000 years? Generations of people. So he brings another interesting idea. And this is from the Cheskuni. He brings it from Dazakena Mibali Tosfos. This is one of the commentators of the Tosfos on Chumash. I opened up this Chumash and I couldn't find the Dazakena from the Bala Tosfos, but instead I found the Cheskuni, and he says the same thing. Okay, this is in Genesis, in Parshas Lech Lecha, in Bereshis. Over there, Hashem, by the bris bein hapsarim, by the covenant amongst the pieces, it says, "V'dor revi'i yashuvu heina." When a God is talking to Abraham, he tells him the fourth generation. He's telling him how the Jews are going to be exiled in Egypt for 3 generations. The 4th generation is coming back. So he wants to reconcile it with 400 years, because God promised Avram that the exile will be 400 years. So how do you count 400 years? And then, so basically he says, the amount of time for one generation is 100 years. If you want to know what's considered a generation, 100 years. We think a generation is much less. Today they make every day something other generation. You got the baby boomers, and you have then you have the, what do they call today? The Z, I forgot what they call them. Every few, the next generation, the millennials, and then there is the next one, so we count like almost like every 10 years another generation. But according to Torah, it's 100 years. Again, he brings other opinions because he actually makes 3 amazing calculations, but I'm just going to stick with one of them. Okay, so 100 years is a generation. So in 6,000 years, how many generations do we have? 60. Because 60 times 100 is 6,000. So the span of generations for 6,000 years, 60 generations. Now the 600,000 souls come down in each generation. That means this concept of 600,000 Jewish souls didn't, obviously, according to this, didn't start with Abraham. It was there in this world. It has to always be there in the world. As we know, Adam included all the 600,000 souls inside of it. And maybe Noah also had the 600,000 souls. We don't exactly know who, what, where, and when, even though Jews were not yet established as a Jewish people in this world. But the concept of the 600,000 souls are always here. In that sense, so these souls come down 60 times. Because they come down each time, 600,000 souls, for 60 journeys. Through each time, 100 years. For the 60 generations of all of history. Okay. Got it? Now we need when Moshiach will come, we're going to need to be able to facilitate those 600,000 souls, but we're going to need to be able to collect all the bodies of all the 60 times the bodies were facilitating the souls. And his cool idea is that all these bodies turn into one body. That means every body is a body that it contains 60 bodies. So it's going to be one person, but the one person is going to hold, meaning it's that body times 60. And that's the significance of 200 cubits. Why? Very simple calculation. He brings a passage in the Talmud of Masechtas Eruvin, in where it says that the height of a human being is 3 cubits. Today's days, height of the average height of the human, 3 cubits. Well, according to some, cubits are, as we spoke earlier, 18 inches. Okay, that would be a little bit on the shorter side. If we say, according to another opinion, a cubit is 2 feet, that's 6 feet. So between 5 and 6 feet, most average being humans, the height of most people, a little shorter, taller. But it's 3 cubits. Tosfos says, however, that does not include the head. Oh, it does make sense. Wait, if we say 18 inches, it doesn't make sense. 1.5 cubits, 3 would be 4.5 without the head. Okay. How much is the head? So again, Tosfos says that when the Gemara says 3 cubits is the height of the person, it's not including the head. It's from the shoulders and down. How tall is the head? So he brings, again, according to him, he's not doing any research scientific data. He's not standing there with it. He's only using Torah sources. So in Torah sources, he finds that the head is 1/10 of the body. Again, I'm not talking over here if this works out accurately, if you're going to take your measurements and figure this out. But The head is a tenth of the body. So if the rest of the body is 3 cubits, what would be a tenth of 3 cubits? A third of a cubit. Three times 3 is 9, and I guess the tenth would be on the outside. Including this, it will be 10 pieces, 10 even pieces, 10 even measurements. So it's 3.3 is the height of the human body today. Make 3.3 times 60. When 3.3 times 60 comes out to be 200 cubits tall. So therefore, he says, since we have 60 generations, then the 60 generations of the same 600,000 souls, but every body is going to have to come back, and these bodies are going to merge together. So that's why the body is going to be 60 cubits tall to facilitate the six, and every body is going to have 60 of the, and that's the height of the 600, and that's how we get to this measurement of 200 cubits. Again, this is only according to Rabbi Meir, and he goes off to explain another explanation. If we say a generation is only 70 years, which according to many commentators, a generation is considered only 70 years, he makes another mathematical equation, and then he does another equation, a third one. But this is, I thought it was just, and I kind of an interesting take on the height of the human being 6. The future body, including every body, is going to be 60 bodies. And that's the height of 200 cubits, so that it can facilitate all the generations that hosted the soul. Cool. Okay. Now, however, I'm going to take you back to the Talmud, and back to this discussion, and back to the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, and let's delve a little deeper and disassemble it and put it all together again. Just a couple of questions. So we have this argument, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says kaimemios means double height, twice the height of Adam. Rabbi Yehuda says kaimemios means only one height of Adam. But the obvious question is, one thing is clear. When Rabbi Yehuda says that the height of man is going to be 100 cubits, and he derives it from the temple, from the Heichal, that's not, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the meaning of the word kaimemios. In other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda, kaimemios is not referring to the Heichal. Or let me put it in other words. Rabbi Yehuda is not saying, oh, Rabbi learned. One way of learning this argument, the simple way of learning this argument would be as follows. Rabbi Meir says we learn it out from the height, the future height of the human is derived from our verse over here in Parshas Bechukosei. And we're here in our pasuk. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, this pasuk is not talking about the future height of man, but we have a different verse in Psalms. And the pasuk in Tehillim is talking about that the daughters are going to be like the cornerstones of the Heichal, which means the height is going to be like the temple. And we learn it out from there. That possibly could be the argument. He says you learn it from here, and he says you learn it from there. So what's his name? Rabbi Meir compares it to Adam's height, and Rabbi Yehuda compares it to the height of the Heichal. Can't say that, because from the way the Gemara puts it down, if you look at the Talmud, it seems like Rabbi Yehuda is also coming to explain the word komemius. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda is not saying, I'm dismissing komemius. That's not talking about future height. That's not, you're going to be walking with an upright posture. Or like we said earlier, it's talking about, I took you out of Egypt and you were in an upright posture. It's not talking about the height of human in the future. Because from the Gemara, when the Gemara lays out the words, when the Talmud says the opening words, "V'oilech eschem Tanya," let me read the Talmud again, just to look at the words a little here. "V'oilech eschem koimemios." The Gemara makes an introduction. It quotes the verse, "I will lead you koimemios." Rabbi Meir says 200 cubits, like the two heights of Adam. Rabbi Yehuda says 100 am. So it's clear from here that Rabbi Yehuda is not just arguing with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda is also interpreting koimemios. That the koimemios, that 100 cubits is an interpretation of what it means. I will lead you koimemios in an upright posture. But Rabbi Yehuda says it's not two, it's one. But not that he's ignoring this verse completely and running to Psalms and running to Tehillim. The reason is very simple why Rabbi Yehuda couldn't drop this and just follow the Psalms, the Tehillim, for a simple reason. Because what does it say in Tehillim? In Tehillim it says that your daughters will be like the temple. But which temple are we talking about? We said earlier that only the second temple was 200 cubits, was 100 cubits tall. The first temple was shorter. So let's say Rabbi Yehuda is looking through all of Scripture, and he's trying to find, where do we know the height of what we're going to be in the future? And he finds a verse comparing the human to the Heichal, to the height of the Heichal. From where does Rabbi Yehuda take that it's referring to the second temple, not the first temple? And more than that, who wrote Psalms? Psalms was written by King David, by David HaMelech. It's his songs. And David HaMelech, did he build the second temple or did he build the first temple? He didn't build the first temple, but he created the whole architecture for the first temple, the whole design. He received it directly from Nasan HaNavi, right? And then the Navi, the prophet, came to him and he gave him the special document of how the structure of the Beis HaMikdash needs to be. So when David HaMelech is singing about your daughters being like the temple, David's image is the first temple, not the second temple. So therefore, we can't say, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he's literally, when Rabbi Yehuda says like the temple, Rabbi Yehuda actually means that the height is derived from the temple. No. Rabbi Yehuda is saying the same like Rabbi Meir, when it said that we're actually, the height of man in the future we learn out from the verse in Leviticus and over here in Vayikra, where it says koimemios. The only thing he's arguing is that it's not double the height, it's singular height, not twice. So what we're going to have to say is we're going to read it as if it says it in the singular term, not in the plural. Koimemios is plural. Rabbi Yehuda says, because it says over there that it's, so Rabbi Yehuda is going like this. We learn it out because it says koimemios, the height, and the height is the height of man, the height of Adam. And that height should be 100. Now, it should really be 200, like Rabbi Meir proves. But Rabbi Yehuda has another verse. Since there's another verse that says that the person is going to be as tall as the Heichal. So from that second verse, all the second verse does is that it forces us to re-examine the word koimemios and not read it in the plural that it means double height. It means only singular height. And now we have no problem that why we're using the second temple, not the first temple. Because we're not using the second, we're not using the fact that we're not comparing man's height to the temple. Man's height is compared to what? To man, to the human, to Adam, from the word koimemios. The second verse from Psalms is only being used as a negator that we can't say it's going to be twice Adam's height, because here it says compared to the temple. Oh, we know it's Adam and it's the temple, so we're forced to say the temple means the second temple. So there it was 100. It matches Adam's height, and the two verses work out really well. Koimemios, the height of Adam. But we take out the vav. It's as if it says koimemis in the singular. And then we compare the heichal, the height of the heichal, which the height of the heichal is what? 100. We're going to say it's the second temple. And then, but the main place we learn it from, of course, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, is from the word kaimimius. Okay. Once we've established that both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are both deriving the height of man from a verse in our parsha, from kaimimius, the only argument is now, are we reading it as double height, or are we reading the word as if it would be singular? If that's the case, this will lead us to a few problems in the passage of the Talmud. What? If this would really be the interpretation of the Talmud, of the Gemara, then there's a few things that are it doesn't read well, and I'll tell you why. Let's see. Again, Rabbi Meir says 200 like the two heights of Adam. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? I'm reading you from the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Meya Amma, 100 cubits. Keneged Heichal Aksalav, corresponding to the Heichal. Shouldn't Rabbi Yehuda say first? And not just shouldn't he say first, he doesn't say anywhere one height of Adam. Should have said that. Rabbi Yehuda Meya Amma, Keneged Koima Achas Shel Adam, corresponding to one height of Adam, because that's the main argument. Rabbi Meir says Koimimi Yus means two heights, double height of Adam. And Rabbi Yehuda argues, and he says that's the main argument. Rabbi Yehuda says 100 cubits, corresponding to the one measure of height of Adam. How do you know? And now he has to bring a proof. How do you know it's that? Because Rabbi Yehuda is problematic. What's his problem? Rabbi Meir fits better in the verse because it says "koimemi yois double," and Rabbi Yehuda is negating it. He has to bring you a proof, and now he'll bring you the verse that says that the daughters are going to be the height of the heichal. That would fit if that's what it would mean. If that's what the Talmud would mean, then he should have written it that way. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, the first thing Rabbi Yehuda should have said was 100 cubits, keneged, corresponding one height of Adam. Okay. Question number 2. When Rabbi Yehuda says, Meya Amma, keneged heichal uksalav, the word keneged is not just, from the word keneged, it seems to imply that the height of man being 100 is not just compared to Adam's height. And from the Heichal, we learn out, from the temple, we learn out that it's not twice the height, it's only once the height, like we're trying to argue. Keneged, the word, seems to imply that the height of man matches the Heichal. In other words, the height of the Heichal is actually a reason why that 100 cubits. So according to the interpretation that we're trying to learn now, what we are deriving from the verse in Psalms that compares the height of man or compares the human structure to the Heichal is not in any way significant to the height of a person. It's two different things. This is a building, and this is a human's height. Two completely separate elements. It's only an indication. It's only coming to prove something. It's not twice height, it's only one height. But it's not because there is some inner resemblance between the human and the building and the structure. Two separate things. Well, what is the connection between human height and a building's height? Like, other than what we said earlier, that you have to make sure that the building is taller than the person, that he can go into it, right? Other than that, what connection would there be? But from the words that Rabbi Yehuda chooses to say, he says, Keneged heichal uksalav. And not only does he say it, but he says it immediately. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Meya Amma Keneged heichal uksalav. Imagine if Rabbi Yehuda would have said like this: Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Meya Amma, 100 cubits. Shenemar. He should have right away said Shenemar, and he would have brought the verse, which verse, or the chsiv, as it says in the pasuk, or he says shenemar over here. Asher b'nivenu kinetiyim u'gedol tavnes heichal, and then he would derive keneged keheichal, like the heichal. Gevoya, his height, keheichal. He should have said it at the end. Then we would recognize that his comparison to the heichal was a very secondary thing. It's only a sign. It's not a reason. But from this that Rabbi Yehuda puts both the word keneged. Keneged means opposing or corresponding. And that he puts it immediately. Keneged heichal u'ksalav is implying that the comparison to the temple is not only as a indicator or a proof, but rather it has content as well. The human height to be as tall as the heichal is because the human should be there's or something, some kind of a reasoning. Why is the human height 100? Rabbi Yehuda is deriving it from the heichal, not just as a proof, but as a reason as well. So we need to understand why. What's the connection? Especially since, as we said earlier, when the verse says kol mamius, in the verse, I will lead you in upright, both according to Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, it says, I will lead you in an upright posture. It's both referring to Adam. In other words, it's not like kol mamius means height. And the question is, which height? Reb Meir says Adam, and Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the height of the heichal, the height of a building. According to Reb Meir, it's the height of a person, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the height of a building. No. Both agree it's the height of Adam. The question is only one height of Adam or two heights of Adam, like we proved earlier. If that's the case, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say that? Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say, Keneged, as we spoke earlier, Keneged Adam Arishon, Keneged the height of Adam? If he believes that way, which we proved earlier, it has to be that way. So then why doesn't he say that? And the truth is, the question is not only on Rabbi Yehuda. The question is in Tehillim. The question would be on King David. King David also learned scripture. I'm sorry. King David also learned the 5 books of Moshe. Chumash. David HaMelech knows what it says in Chumash. In Chumash it says, that Hashem will lead us in the height, which we're saying that the meaning of the height is like the height of Adam. So if Torah is comparing the height of the man in the future, the 100 cubits or the 200 cubits, whatever it is, but we're measuring it by the height of a human, why would the Tehillim come? Why would Psalms come? Why would King David in Psalms come and change it and use the height? We're talking the same 100 cubits. So why compare it to the height of man and not? Or sorry, why would the pasuk in Tehillim come and change and speak and measure the height of the human of the future and compare it to the heichal, not to the height of what it says in the Torah? Why is the Tehillim doing that? Obviously, there must be a deep reason why the two should be related, but we need to understand what that is. And to continue the same reason of questioning, the comparison of a human height to a human makes a lot of sense because we're dealing with human height. So if you're looking, how tall is a human? So you say you want to say he'll be a giant, so you'll find a human giant. You're not saying he's tall like a skyscraper, because what's the connection? This is a building and this is a person. Why should you even compare it? The comparison should be to a human. And which human? Adam Arisha makes a lot of sense because he's the first human. That's the original man, and we all come from him. And one day we will go back being as tall as Adam, reflecting the same spiritual heights that Adam, and that will reflect in our physical bodies. That makes sense. But what kind of ideas to compare a human to a building? Again, all this question is all according to Rabbi Yehuda. And finally, Remember in the beginning of the class, quite a while ago, when we asked the question, even according to Rebbe Meir says it's twice the height of Adam. We asked the question, how does Rebbe Meir know it's the word kamemios means double height. Maybe it's double the height of people today. Well, what was the explanation we gave earlier? What the Marsha says? The Marsha says that it's obvious it means Adam Arishon, because it can't be that when God is going to perfect the human being in the future, that the human is going to be any less than Adam. So the verse is only telling you that it's 2 times Adam. In other words, we really don't even need a verse. Without any verses, if we had to guess, if we are told that, humans are going to be one day recreated by God, and therefore and someone, a little child is there, and he says, how tall will they be? No, good question. Is God making us exactly the same, or is he going to make us like more impressive? What would you tell the child? So the Marsha says, the obvious answer is no less than what the perfect human was back then. 100 cubits. So then we don't even need a verse to begin with. We don't need a puzzle. There's no need to tell us any verse. Rebbe Meir, the reason why we have according to Rebbe Meir, it's okay, because Rebbe Meir is saying it's not 1, it's double. That's what the verse is saying. You would think 1 height. The condition of the human being is going to be twice the stature of Adam. It's going to be double the height. Oh. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, who learns that the height of Adam is the height of man in the future is actually only going to be like Adam. And for that, he has 2 verses. One in Koimemios, which Koimemios means the 1 height of Adam. And the other verse that he derives it from is he compares it to the Heichal to tell you that it's 1. If it's only 1, the verse shouldn't tell anything. That we know. We know that the human is going to be at least as high as Adam. That's a simple thing. The Marsha wants to say that the verse in Tehillim is needed. The second verse, the verse in Tehillim, is actually needed only for the women, not for the men. Because if you say the man is, when Adam was a man, what was his height? Woman, we don't know what their height is. Eve not necessarily was as tall as Adam. We don't know. Her height, we don't know. So the verse has to tell you that even the women will also be 100 cubits tall. That's meaning Benoseinu, the daughters, Ketav Nasef. But that's the Marsha's explanation. But from the simple meaning of the Gemara, it implies that this whole discussion is not just about the women. It seems to be a discussion about the human being in general. How tall will they be? Men and women. So again, the question, we go back to the question, according to Rabbi Yehuda, why do you even need any verse? If you're going to say it's twice the thing, okay, that we need to be told. But once the height of Adam, we're deriving that already on our own. And if we can't derive it on our own, then we can't derive it from the verse either. Because as we said earlier, it says twice 2 heights. Maybe 2 heights, as we said, our height. So the fact that it's twice the height of Adam anyways, we're assuming is something that we're just assuming based on our own svara, on our own understanding, not from a verse. But if that's the case, according to Rabbi Yehuda, why is that necessary? All of this leads us to a very, very beautiful answer and deep understanding of this whole thing. This is in a talk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Likutei Sichos in the 7th volume, a phenomenal explanation in this whole thing. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the physical height is a reflection of the spiritual power. Why was Adam Arishon 100 cubits tall? Adam Arishon was 100 cubits tall because we all have 10 faculties in our soul. We have Chachma, intellect. The intellect has three faculties or 3 powers called Chachma, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Das, knowledge. And then there are the 7 emotional attributes: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. These are the 10 powers of the soul. And with these 10 powers, we are an imitation of God. Because as God created us in his image, and the image is really the image of the human soul. The body is only a receptacle. The body is a keli, is a vessel. But it's really the human soul that's in the image of God. So the human soul has these 10 powers corresponding, because God also manifests and emanates from himself 10 attributes through which he projects himself to the world. And in that very image, he created our soul. We know that each one of those 10 faculties have the other 10 inside of them. So Chachma, for example, has Chachma of the Chachma, and the Bina of the Chachma, and the Das of the Chachma, the Chesed of the Chachma, the kindness of the wisdom, the might or the power of the wisdom, the Gevura of the wisdom. It's literally what we do in Sfira Sa'omer now. Every night we're counting, and every night we're specifying there's 49 days. And there, see, Sfira Sa'omer, we're not dealing with the 3 intellectual powers, because we're working on our emotions. Our emotions are comprised of 7 primary emotions. But each emotion, why is it 49 days? Because each emotion has subcategories. The nuances of the emotion. For example, in kindness, you can, when you're feeling loving towards someone, which is the emotion of kindness, loving and giving, there is the giving of the giving. And sometimes because you're kind to someone, there is a withholding out of kindness. That means when you love your children very much, but you don't want to spoil them, so you withhold, even though it's hard, but it's coming out of immense love. And actually, sometimes the gevura of the chesed is even a deeper element expression of the kindness than the chesed of the chesed. You know, giving the child the 10th piece of chocolate already in the last half an hour is not going to show so much kindness as actually saying no to the child and having the child, maybe throw a temper tantrum, but you're not giving them the child has to be disciplined. So, and it's all both love. So you understand how each, and the same as with gevura. The gevura has chesed in it, and so on and so forth. In Sfira Sa'omer, we illustrate all this in the emotional arena. But that's only on the 7, so 7 times 7 is 49. But if we also count the intellectual faculties, so then we have 10, but not 7 times 10 or not 10 times 7. We're dealing with 10 powers, and each of the 10 having all 10 inside. So we're really taking the intellect and the emotions together, which is really the full structure. So the full structure, both of the human being down here and the divine being above, is 100. So we can say somehow something like this. The reason why we are small today and not physically big, our physical petiteness and smallness and is an indication that our powers of our true human qualities and human godly powers are not today fully developed and fully active. And as a result of that, our bodies are also in a shrunken state, in a very mitigated state, because our entire persona is mitigated. We're not really shining our true talents and our true selves. Our intellect is not at its full prowess, at its full power of what our intellect should be. Our kindness is very, very compromised today. Our capacity to love, our capacity to persevere, our capacity to give thanks. Severely, we can maybe have a little bit of thanks and acknowledgement, but to have the depth of acknowledgement, the nuances of it. So everything today is very short and very brief. It's not developed, it's not colorful. Adam Rishon, when he was created, his 10 faculties and all of his aspects of the soul were in full-blown expression. So for that, it needed 100 cubits of body to really facilitate. The 100 cubits of body corresponded to the 100 powers of the soul, the 10 times 10 of the soul. What is the novelty going to be when Moshiach comes? The novelty is going to be when Moshiach comes is that today's day, that in the past, even Adam, who had the 100 qualities, the 10 qualities of his soul fully manifest. That's why he was at that height. That was all a gift from God. God gifted him with a soul. Like we said earlier, God created him with the image of himself. And all Adam needed to do was to allow those godly gifts to shine forward. Now, that takes work as well, but it wasn't his own production. Adam didn't make himself, God made him. So all those qualities were just it's called a flow from above. The double height that the human being is going to have when Moshiach is going to come is going to be because as a result of the darkness and the fall and the sin and the disconnect, we, in addition to us working on revealing our innate godly powers, we also create from below a whole new divine structure. This is the concept which is discussed many times, that there's the difference between the tzaddik and the Balchu. The tzaddik is the person who is following in God's ways and is a person who never damaged his soul. And the lights and the powers of his soul, his divine intelligence, his or her divine emotions have never been tarnished or never been blocked or never been clogged. And all their life, they're just, they've always made good choices and they didn't disrupt the flow of their divine being. But then you have a person who's wrecked every element of their soul to the point that nothing of their godly self is functioning. Everything got damaged. That's what happens. The soul can get damaged as well as a result of our misuse, our souls of our sometimes of corrupted ways and so on, of sinfulness and so on and so forth. It causes blemishes. And the soul in its inside, deep inside, doesn't get ruined, but its outer ability to express itself into the body is blocked. So how does a person like that repent? And how does a person like that come back to God? So it's explained that the beauty of the Balchu, of the penitent, is that the penitent is actually discovering the godly qualities from within the darkness itself, from within their body, from within their human self. Because ultimately, even our humanity, not just our soul, our godly, even our humanity, even the physical world is also the handiwork of God. And in it is the DNA of Hashem. And so therefore, if you dig deep, even to our human psyche and forget about our godly soul that is completely a piece of him from above. But when we unearth the qualities of ourselves, we discover the godly qualities that are in. And then we can reconstruct 10 powers. And these 10 powers are a different nature of 10 powers. They're called 10 powers of returning light. In Kabbalah, there is the concept called direct light and returning light, or yashar and or choser. Or yashar means emanation from above, or choser means rebounding light coming from below. So it's explained that the concept of 10 sefirot, 10 attributes, exists on 2 levels. There is 10 sefirot as God emanates them, and there are 10 sefirot as they reflect backwards from the creation back to God. If we say that the 10 are really 100, so there is 100 of lights emanating from the divine downward, and there is 100 lights emanating from our toils and effort upward. There's the 100 sefirot that are stimulated by the tzaddikim. A tzaddik is just like a flow, a download of the divine. And then there are the 10 sefirot, which include 100 that are uploaded by our efforts, not downloaded. They're uploaded from us back towards God. We from within our own darkness, without the revelation. Because when a person already disconnected their Wi-Fi, how are they suddenly getting excited again? How are they getting involved again? It's because they're wallowing in their darkness until within their own pain and misery, they discover that life can't be just failure. Deep inside, I have to have a connection to God. And they uncover the embedded hidden sparks. But these sparks are not considered that they're coming from above. These are our labor. We're mining our own gold. We're revealing our own human capacity, which is really the deepest sparks of the divine that is hidden and embedded. And when we uncover that, we construct the 10 attributes: kindness and severity and perseverance and royalty and glory and wisdom. And so on. It's like the wisdom that's street smarts. It comes from the world. It doesn't come from, someone who's been learning it from a teacher who's been hearing tradition, hearing some saintly rabbi teaching. But someone through their own work, from their own process of negation, of living life and seeing everything that's going on. And from there they come to an understanding of God. They build a wisdom from within themselves, from within the world. These are 2 powers. Adam was only created with one because he was still a tzaddik. He was still the original creation. So he had 100 powers. We're going to have a double human. And every single person when Moshiach comes is going to contain both these powers. We're going to be, on the one hand, our initial godliness, in which we are supposed to be a download, a channel for divinity, is going to be restored. Because once God is going to recreate us, he's going to re-emanate into our souls his divine attributes, which is going to reflect in our godly attributes all the way into our body. And that's going to be the 100 powers. And therefore, it's going to take 100 cubits of a human being's body to reflect that godliness that is emanating from above, equal to the way it was in Adam. But our future selves are also going to reflect the human that we created through all of our tshuva, through all of our repentance, through all of our work, building ourselves up from the bottom up. And that Adam didn't have. That's us, because we're the Balchu. We're recreated. And God takes all of that, and when he builds us, he's building us from the download and the upload of these 100 powers. So we're going to have 200 cubits. Now, Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda both agree to this concept, that the human being of the future is going to have the qualities of the Or Yashar, of the direct light, and the qualities of the Or Chayzer, of the reflecting, of the rebounding light, the light coming from below upward. We're going to have both. And here's where I'd mentioned to you in the beginning, but Rabbi Yehuda is going much deeper than Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, usually you see most people are kind of relegated to one of these paths. There are people who are very good as channels. They live their lives as channels. As we said earlier, it's Sadiq. From the get-go, their soul is so obvious in them. And their Yetzer Hara, for whatever reason, of course, it's their work also, but also whatever, their Yetzer Hara has always remained kind of not, their evil inclination has never really been able to tackle them. So from their very get-go in their life, they're just a beacon of light. From when they're a little child, they're a saint, a tzaddik or a tzaddikis. And they're just a beautiful human being. And these people operate primarily as channels for light from above. There isn't much tshuva going on in their life because they don't need it. Their godliness is so accessible to them. There's always new innovation and new insight. They're just like a channel, like literally like a faucet of holiness flowing through them. And then there are the darker human beings, the human beings that didn't do well in school. They were dropouts. They ended up when they were teenagers already arrested a couple of times. They had a whole rap sheet with the cops. They had a whole, and then from their jail cells, I'm just giving that as an extreme example, from their jail cells, from deep inside that pit of darkness, they did some deep soul searching and they come out and they become such positive forces in the world, and they can meet with the most corrupted, ruthless criminals, and even in them reveal a spark of the divine by speaking to them and telling them their story of success. You have these people. It's unbelievable. And we marvel at their ability, at their strength to construct themselves from nothing, from the death. When it was everything of them was completely, they were all the godliness that was originally put in them disintegrated. And they kind of, from the earth, built themselves up. And each one of these have a quality. There's a certain purity of light, purity that's only to be found in the tzaddik. These people, when they'll talk, their talk is a little bit more, it doesn't have the refinement of the violin, it doesn't have that, because they have a whole different language. When they can be conveying very, very beautiful things, but you can hear in it a little bit the coarseness, because they've come from the coarseness. They have the lingo. They know the language of the street language. And precisely because of that, they can relate to the world, to outside. But there's a certain lacking the finesse. It's lacking a certain sparkle that comes from the person who was never tainted, never jaded, never got, it's just a pure channel of light. A holy human being from the very get-go. But then there is a certain truth that you'll only get, the certain depth you'll only get from the people that fought it out and found their way to God from within themselves. Because by them you realize it's so true, as opposed to others where you can argue that their lives being so godly has a lot to do with their circumstances. It's a little circumstantial. So this might be brighter, but this is more solid. The Balchu. So there is a quality in both. But rarely do you find one person that has both. It's either a person is in this mode or the person is in that mode. When Moshiach will come, because it's going to be the sum total, and after the resurrection of all of our toil and our effort, we are all, each and every one of us, are going to have the qualities both of the tzaddik and the Balchu. We're going to have a personality that is going to reflect the purity of the innocence, of the purity of the divine. And we're also going to have a personality that is going to reflect the truth of the struggle. So Reb Meir, and that's going to be awesome. Reb Meir says we're going to be 200 cubits feet tall. One person is going to have both. It's unbelievable. Each and every one. That's a rare. And that's only going to be in the days of Mashiach. Till then, today's days, we don't have a human being. You either belong to this group or you belong to that group. Two types of people in this world. Mashiach comes, we're all going to have these two personalities living together in one human. However, it's going to be two modes. According to Rameh, it's still going to remain two modes. Till 12 o'clock in the morning, we're in one mode, and then the time it gets to the afternoon, we're kind of flipping over to the other mode. In other words, depending when you catch the person, you can catch the person on a Monday, he's in one state of mind, and you catch him on a Tuesday, he's in another state of mind. In other words, when you're looking at this person, which part of them are glowing? Their upper 100 cubits or their lower 100 cubits? It's going to be different times when different operation. Their intelligence, which they're speaking, is it the intelligence that they learned from below, or is it the intelligence that's coming from above? Which element of their personality? So it's a double 100, but they're both occupying two parts of their body, reflecting that it's each one is existing as in its own space. And here's the depth of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda comes and Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the two converge together to the point that every single nuance in a person's life, every single detail of your life is going to contain both the flow of divinity from above and the strength of the toil and the effort coming from below. It's going to be completely merged together. And for that reason, again, Rabbi Yehuda argues that this is so good, because according to this, you don't have to change Koma Mios. Koma Mios remains plural. Two heights. But two heights occupying the same 100 cubits. Because every single one, every part, your chesed, your kindness is going to be the chesed of the tzaddik and the chesed of the Balchu together. It's going to have both the quality of divine light and human effort and toil. It's going to be both direct light coming from above and rebounding light coming from below. That's like totally impossible, because it's either or. So according to Reb Meir, it's the chiddush is that the fact that one person will be able to have these two modes, that too is awesome, but it's still relegated to two separate experiences. One day like this, 1 hour like this, 1 hour like that. However, it's gonna be divided. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, both of them converging to becoming utterly one. How's that happen? So Rabbi Yehuda says, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. We derive it from the Heichal. It doesn't only mean we learn it out technically from the Heichal. He's deriving this idea because it's the same concept was in the temple. When the temple was built, Rabbi Yehuda is not comparing the height to 100 cubits. Yeah, the 100 cubits of the Heichal was both 100 cubits of light from above and elevation from below. Where do you see that? Regarding the temple, it says, V'asuli migdash v'shachanti b'seichel. That's all you need. You make for me a temple and I will dwell in it. So what does that mean? It's one verse. And what that means is like this. V'asuli migdash means you're making. It's human toil. It's not. The temple didn't come down from heaven. The third temple is going to come down from heaven. But even there you see there's two opinions. It's coming from heaven. It's being made from below. It's both. Same idea. But over here, the first temple, the Mishkan, and it wasn't made in heaven. It was made through human bricks and not bricks. They took stones and it was human toil. And then you'll say, and then God says, I will dwell in it. So it's two, and then God comes down and dwells in it. So it's like human effort and godliness converge together, much deeper than that. The V'asuli migdash, when you're making it, you're already making holiness. V'shachanti b'seicham, you're making when we were building the temple, we were building a temple that is at the same time the dwelling of God. Because our actions were imbued with God's actions. It wasn't even two separate things in the temple. Where do you see that? So, for instance, this literally was expressed in one of the miracles that were in the temple. When they built the ark in the temple, the Aron, we know every physical, we live in time and space. That's our properties. God obviously is outside of time and space. We live in time and space. Everything we do is within the paradigm of, within the structure of time and space. So whenever we're building anything, it has spatial properties. So they built an ark, and we built the ark with the physical properties of the physical world, which is it takes up space. Not only, and that wasn't only because we have no choice, because if we're doing something carpentry with a piece of wood, it's going to have to occupy space. We can't, break out of space. They didn't have that ability to do so. They're humans. No. God is commanding them that you have to put your human world into my temple, which means you got to build a temple, a ark, where the ark occupies 2.5 cubits was its length, 1.5 cubits was its width. But we also know that the ark didn't occupy space. When they put the ark down, the Aron, in the Holy of Holies, literally, it didn't occupy space, because the whole room was 10 cubits in the tabernacle. In the temple, it was a little different, but I'm going to use the tabernacle. 10 cubits, and the ark was 2.5 cubits. Let's say this table was the tabernacle, the whole width. So let's say this is 10 cubits. Let's take this book was the ark. So this book, let's say, is 2.5 cubits, just for the argument. So then, if that's the case, so you have 10.5 minus 2.5 is 7.5 cubits. Divide 7.5, so it's, I think, 3 3/4 here, 3 3/4 here. So if you would have taken a measuring a tape or a ruler or whatever, and put this in over here and go from here to the wall, you would have 3 3/4, and here 3 3/4, and over here 2.5. I don't know if my math is good, but that's kind of, you get the idea. That's what it would have been, but that's not what it was. If you measured from here to the wall, you had 5. You measured from here to the wall, you had 5. You measure the whole thing at the same time. Imagine you have 4 people at the same time standing there with tape measures. One of them is measuring from wall to wall, is getting 10. This guy is measuring from here to here, he's getting 5. He's measuring from here, he's getting 5. This guy's measuring here, he's getting 2.5. So this 2.5 cubits is in the room. It's 2.5 cubits, but it's not within space. Somehow there's a convergence of the divine and the human and the creation over here in a mysterious way. The infinite and the finite have merged together. And it's not like they made an Aron that takes up space. And then afterwards, the divine came and knocked the space out of it. Like a spaceless power came in and overwhelmed it. That's not what happened. When they built the Mishkan, it was built in a way, what does that mean? That their actions were both human and divine at the same time. It was both coming from earth and coming from heaven at the same time. That's the beauty of the Beis Mishkan. The Mishkan is this perfect fusion. Now, man can't do that. Adam was a great person. Human, the concept of human represents a certain design. And everything that has a certain design has to work with certain rules and regulations. And rules and regulations, you have certain systems, and certain systems clash with other systems. So, therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, the uniqueness of the human being of the future, you can't compare him to Adam. Yeah, it is the two heights of Adam, but Adam as being Adam, man as being man, inevitably is locked in a certain structure and a certain system. And therefore, it can't be yes and no at the same time. It can't be at the same time the purity from above and the work from below. It can't be, it's either up or down. Which one is it? These are two opposite qualities. You can't have them together. It's impossible. Oh, so you can have the two heights, but the two heights like Reb Meir, each one separate. But having them both together, you can't. The Heichal, that was outside of any system. And the Heichal was actually what allowed for the Heichal, what allowed for the temple to have that quality. It's because the essence of God himself is outside of all systems, not bound by any system, above all boundaries and above all systems. And he can do whatever he wishes, even to combine the absolute impossible, even to bring together what just cannot make logically sense, and yet to him and that's the Heichal. The Heichal reflected God's very essence. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda is saying that both these, there's 100 and 100, and they're both the same 100. And from where does he derive it? Keneged Heichal, he learns it from the Heichal. So it's both, it's Adam, and again, it's both structures of Adam, but converged as one, which Adam can't do it, the Heichal does do it, the temple does it. Rabbi Yehuda brings the temple. Now we'll also understand why the first one was Rabbi Meir, and the second one was Rabbi Yehuda. We're just going to conclude with this. The difference of the word Meir and Yehuda is, Meir means light. Or Meir means the source of light. Or light, Meir means he illuminates. Yehuda means submission. Yehuda comes from the word submission. And here's the amazing, amazing idea. Those people who are living in the world of revelation, the world of light, in the realm of divine light, which means divine projection, which is not the divine essence, divine revelation, over there are certain rules and regulations. Even though there can be both finite and infinite, up and down, there can be both, but they'll both be separate. They can't be totally one. In the world of revelation, each one is in its own realm. Only in the essence of God, there's no contradictions at all. It can be both like this and like that at the same time. Because he's perfect oneness. And therefore everything is one. How do you touch God's essence? Not through illumination. You don't touch God's essence through illumination. You touch God's essence through simple submission. When you submit and you say, Moda Ani, I acknowledge you, I submit to you, God, then that submission reaches the essence. Understanding, illumination, all that is all great, but that's all the outside of God. The essence of God you touch only in submission. Yehuda means submission. Rebbe Yehuda, whose soul is etched, his entire service of God is submission. He can hear and sense the essence of Hashem and touch the essence of Hashem. And from the essence of God, he can take the two modes of service and bring it into 100 cubits. In the same 100, and it's both from God. It's both him and us at the same time. But from the world of Rebbe Meir, there are still certain restrictions. So even though Rebbe Meir says the one human being is going to have both, but it's going to occupy two floors, the upper floor and the lower floor. And that's the secret of the human being when Mashiach comes. We will be so one with God. We will be totally ourselves and totally Him at the same time. Uploading and downloading, and the upload and the download will be inseparable. Baffles the mind. I don't really get it, but I guess we'll see it. We'll experience it. It's going to be totally us, our innovation, and totally yet God's truth coming through us. Pretty neat. So we have a lot to look forward to, Be'ezus Hashem. Meanwhile, we all can go get some really big pair of pants, some really large clothing, and get ready for this awesome new human, the human of the future. Let it be already, not so much in the future, let it be now. Thank you, everyone. Moshiach should be here now.